So the agenda, we're going to have a few things to talk about. One, we're going to talk about what CWD is. So that's our CWD 101. Then we're going to talk about the other diseases, because I think it's important to really see the differences between CWD and other diseases that affect deer. The next one, we're going to talk about CWD that's here in Delaware. I'm sure that's what's all on your minds, right? Then we're going to talk about recommendations for the hunters and general public, and then we'll go into additional questions. So at each moment, we talk about CWD 101, we get done with that. We'll have time for questions here. We'll start in-house, then we'll move online, okay? So let's get into this. CWD 101, what is the basics of what is chronic wasting disease? So chronic wasting disease, it's a neurological degenerative disease that's within this family here of TSCs. There's different kinds of this. It's caused by what's called a prion, which is an abnormal protein. This protein, imagine a bowl of spaghetti. Proteins are just kind of mixed together. And one protein is abnormal and teaches the other ones to become straight, basically. So you got that, you go from a bowl of spaghetti to like almost like dried straight spaghetti. This causes holes within what you see here to the right. I don't know if we have, here's a little laser pointer. The next one. Here we see a picture of a healthy brain tissue. To the right of this, you can see the effect of brain tissue of CWD and the prions that it causes. The next one. The incubation period of CWD is within 15 to 18 months. So once it's in the system, it takes about 15 to 18 months to basically grow. From there, it could be several years before visual signs seen. Most deer that you see that are out in the wild, you don't even know have CWD until the late signs, which we have a list here of the clinical side of all the things that you'll probably see, if you ever see it for that matter, late signs. So next includes excessive salivation, excessive thirst, excessive urination, listlessness, depression, loss of appetite, as you see they start getting real thin, slumped head, the drooping ears, and they grind their teeth. So all these symptoms tend to happen at the very late stages, just before death. It's often difficult. You can't just diagnose it by looking at it. They have to be euthanized and tested. This disease always ends in death. There is no recovery. Once they have it, they're going to die. There's no questions about that. Now, typically, the death is not always caused by CWD itself. It's usually from secondary causes, such as the excessive salivation. Sometimes they aspirate that, or they breathe it into their lungs, get pneumonia, and die from pneumonia. How's it spread? It's transmitted. Deer are pretty social for the most part. They're not always having a big party, but they talk to each other through, they lick each other, they smell each other. It spreads through body fluids and like feces, saliva, blood, urine. This is where that direct contact comes. I'm sure there's plenty of hunters in here. You see the scrapes, and those scrapes have urine in it. There's prions in that urine. Okay. Sometimes even so, you've got the urine, the feces that get into the soils, and of course the carcasses. There's those leftover prions. Those get into the soil. Those soils, unfortunately, it stays in those soils for quite a while. There's a long time, and it gets plants uptake the prions into like whatever plant is growing in that area. So you get prions in the soil. It could be uptaken by the plants in that soil. And of course, the deer can eat that, and there's a cause of transmission. There's been some questions out there regarding how can you just burn it off the landscape? You really can't. High temperatures for a long time can break down prions, but just lighting a fire on the ground is not going to get rid of it. It's there. Just like I said, introduced it there for a long time. Then there's the human-assisted spread, unfortunately, where this is why we've had bans for quite some time, where from like our neighbors to the west, Maryland, where they had CWD, we've asked you guys not to bring those carcasses into Delaware. There's a potential spread there because that carcass, like I said, the carcass will be soiled, and there we are. Disposal of carcasses, making sure that we're not just dumping it out in the back. We'll talk about this a little bit later, response, but making sure we're getting rid of these carcasses correctly. Of course, then there's hunting practices where we're using baiting and attractants. This causes deer to attract unnaturally. Yeah, they do it on their own, but this is that practice of we're doing it unnaturally for them. We're like, hey, there's a big pot here, everybody can come here to this corner, rather than spreading them out. Where did it come from? We don't know. It's been around for a little while. It was we first founded in Colorado in 1967 in a captive mule deer facility. It was then later identified in a wild elk herd in 1981. Then it was identified in a wild and captive whitetail herd in 2001. As of 2025 in April, there was 36 states and 4 Canadian provinces. We are now number 37. So this is usually the bigger question on everybody's mind. Can it be transmitted to humans? As of right now, no study has shown that it can be transmitted to humans. But that is a big question mark there. We just don't know. But for now, the studies say no. There is some potential, but it's very, very low. There was one study with macaque monkey, and this was kind of done over, I believe, in Canada. And it was like they fed this monkey brain tissue with very high prion loads. Then eventually it got to getting tracking CWD. So it's been kind of shown in like humanized mice. But again, there were so many things involved for to go from that species to the other. Okay, we made it this far. We're going to stop here. Are there questions in the room so far? Go for it.
If you translate the other animals, foxes, cougars, possums, things like that.
For all we know, no. Anything else? Anything online? No? All right, we'll go ahead and move on. So let's talk about the other diseases. I'm going to find this a little bit important so I get a lot of calls in the public about this where, well, I've seen this, it's probably CWD. Deer get quite a bit of diseases. For lack of better, I wish I could pick a better way to say this. They're kind of gross sometimes. And you get all kinds of things. So let's start with viral diseases. This is one that many of you are probably familiar with, hemorrhagic disease, because this almost every year. There's some seasons that are worse than others, but we'll talk about that a little later. Then there's over here, you find a little laser pointer here, you'll see cutaneous fibromas. This is just deer warts. This is deer get it spread by a fly. They can survive this for all intents and purposes unless it gets like in their eye. Malignant guttural fever, bovine viral diarrhea, and then rabies. We've had one detection several years ago. So there's just a few viral diseases. Then there's bacterial diseases. This is where you see anthrax, which is so rare. Some of the big ones, but some of them people see this brain abscess, this gross looking stuff right here. This is where there's an infect or an open wound somewhere and bacteria gets inside. And this is where this body's trying to protect the deer from more bacteria by creating almost a boogery substance. I hate saying that word, but we'll go with it for now. And this puts pressure on the brain, and you'll get that where they're like heads cocked to the side and walking in circles. Okay. And then I get that, oh, this got CWD. Now, I just went out today actually where a deer was acting kind of strange and walking in circles. It had brain abscess. There's bovine tuberculosis, which is in this picture here. We don't have it here. Keep it that way, hopefully. You've seen that over in Michigan. Salmonella, and then Lyme disease. Let's get on to parasitic diseases. Big one here is ticks. Everybody's seeing ticks everywhere. We have a great biologist that works for us. Ashley, she's doing great studies with ticks now. There's, of course, disease that's spread with ticks now. There's liver fluke, lungworm, meningeal worm. That's one that we discussed here recently that they handle it fairly well, but they're like little white, kind of, I won't say tapeworms, but they're little worms that get in the brain and into the meningeal spaces that cause them to act a little funny. Then there's arterial worm that causes this. This is where the worms get impacted into the carotid artery and it makes their jaw basically numb and unusable. And then food gets impacted in there and you see this. They can get ear mites, mange, which we see here. And I'm sure a lot of you as hunters have seen this nasal pot where there's a fly that goes in, lays an egg, and gets a larva in there, and they're always like snorting, sneezing, and coughing. I'm sure we've all heard that. So these are just some diseases that deer can get. Not all are the same. They're managed differently. So let's talk about when we started with EHD. And I really want to point this out because I get a lot of people that really are concerned about EHD and try to, really compare EHD and CWD. They are two different diseases with two different problems and two different management styles. One, EHD on a state level, like really zoom out the map, it's not that big of a thing. It happens in pockets. So we'll just say your farm. If it's on yours, you'll see 15 some odd deer die at once, and it's impactful. It's a scary sight seeing. You're thinking, man, all the deer are having this. No, it might just be on your farm or maybe yours, right? These are sporadic, they're acute, they happen quick, and then they're done, right? And it's really impactful when you see this. So SCWDS, or the Southeastern Cooperative Wildlife Disease Study, they had a quote to this: to date, repeated HD outbreaks have not represented a limiting factor to deer population growth. And what that means is these die-offs happen, but deer recover. Okay. And then see, so I say acute, that means now, this very moment, this is happening this very moment. Then we got chronic. This is where WD comes in. Once it's in the population, it stays. There's no going away from this. Okay? It's there long term. So we're talking about sprint versus a marathon. So some studies you see there's, it's more modeling, where there's maybe some alters in age structure, where there's fewer older age deer over time, but this isn't modeling. Like they use like the statistics to see what would happen over time. Transmission, EHD is spread by a biting insect called midge, and it doesn't affect humans. CWD, we talked about this already, where it's spread through saliva, urine, feces, blood, and in the environment, but it's not known to affect humans. So the one thing I want to put out there is, so EHD, it's relatively new to us here in the North. It's been going on in the South for quite some time, and they treat it as an episode of, okay, it's happening, and then they move on. It's just new for us. Whether you believe it or not, climate change is happening, and it's just, we're seeing it up here now, all right? So again, EHD, early signs, rapid fever, that acute onset. They have that severe lethargy, loss of appetite, and confusion. That's usually induced by the fever. So that's where you see that acute happening. Happens right then and there. And then you see those large population declines, but they are typically able to recover from that. And this is attributed to severe weather changes. So if we have a wet spring and we have all these ponds everywhere, the midges are able to lay their eggs in these ponds. Now, as long as there's a bunch of ponds, one or two deer might visit one pond with midges, and the rest still have plenty of other water sources to go to, and you don't have to worry about, all the deer getting the midges, right? Or getting bit by the midges. Now, when late season comes into play, then these pools dries up. Now you have one source that these deer have to find. That source might be the source of the midges. All the deer go to the source, and now all these deer are getting bit. That's where you see those big, oh my gosh, events. Okay. But sometimes EC happens almost every year. Every year. CWD, you don't want to see it. And we'll see a picture of this in the future here shortly. It's not always obvious, and it requires testing. I can't just look at a deer and say, yep, that's got CWD. I have to test it. And of course, like we've discussed already, there's no recovery. It's always going to be death for these deer. All right. Of course, EHD has no vaccine either, no treatment, but it's self-limiting, like we discussed. So I wanted to really put that out there. That quote from SCWDS, limiting, it's self-limiting. It happens on its own. CWD, no vaccine, no treatment, and models suggest that there's a population structure change. Okay. Again, modeling. And at this point, we're going to stop, take a break. Questions? Does anybody in this room have questions?
And we did have a request to, if there are questions in the room, just repeat them.
Sorry. Yes. Correct. Anything in here? No. Anything online?
No, other than what she just asked.
Okay.
So,
all right.
good. Thank you.
Yep, and I had that in my notes. Perfect. All right, we'll go ahead and move on. CW surveillance. How do we surveil for this? We're going to talk about, I believe that last slide was CWD here in Delaware. Let me go back and make sure we're on the right thing. Yeah, CWD in Delaware. So now we're getting to us here. How does it affect us? CW surveillance, we've been doing this for quite a while. We typically do this with November general firearm season. A lot of you probably have seen myself or my cohort here out of the processors in this area, probably Yuki or Marks or something like that, coming up to you, hey, can we get your deer for sampling? Thank you all for helping us. It's you that we have been able to detect this. Okay, I want that to be understood. Thank you. I want to put that out there personally. Go to multiple processor locations. And then we also have been using the Delaware Hunters Against Hunger for those donations. We take those and we've been using the ones we can, we test. We also do opportunistic surveillance where there's a roadkill. If I see it, I grab the lymph nodes, send it off. And of course, when you guys call, hey, there's an issue here, like with this deer, I got a call here just recently. This deer's scaring me. Come out here, do something with it, and I'll test it. I just want to point out too, with these opportunistic calls and these mortalities and these morbidity calls that you guys, when you call us, there's like a time limit, 24 to 48 hours, depending on weather, because sometimes when the summer gets hot, these things cook. So they get bloated. So if you can kind of let us know in 24 to 48 hours, I can send my gentleman here, Darren, come out, get a sample arc and come out. All right, so kind of keep that in mind if you don't mind. 24. All right. So testing, we do it in several fashions for Delaware. Well, we'll get to that in a second. There's ELISA. There's one method of testing. There's immunohistochemistry, which is IHC. This is what we do here, and then there's RT Quick. These three methods, there's the first two I mentioned, the ELISA and IHC, those are the gold standards. That's the one that most everybody across the nation is doing. And they usually do one and then check the other, kind of back it up. RT Quick is really new. Well, relatively new. Let me back my statement up on there. It's fairly new. It's working its way through approval, but it's going to be a while because there's just methods of how they're utilizing this and all the methods they're using to test with. So that's a little up in the air. Here in Delaware, we're using the medial retropharyngeal lymph nodes. We basically, so when we ask you for your head, we're really testing these two little nodules here in the neck. I'm sure some of you might have seen pictures of this. This is actually me and my son. I've gotten him to do it, so but he can do it, anybody can do it. Then we send those samples up to a local lab called the Pennsylvania Animal Diagnostic Laboratory System, or PADLS. They do the first initial, this is what, in this case, they did the initial confirmation, then they send it over to the National Veterinary Services Laboratory, or NVSL. So you have the initial and then the national level that really confirms that, makes sure. Any other questions? So going back before me, Joe and his cohort have been testing for quite some time. Since 2003, typically on the annual basis, we try to get 600, 120 from Newcastle, 180 from Kent, 300 from Sussex County. So to date, we've done 12,938 samples thus far. That's quite a bit. In 2025, we had 642 samples that we sent up to PADLS. Of that, 2 were confirmed, not just by PADLS, but also by NVSL. Any other questions? So, 2 detections, where were they at? One was just a few miles away from here on the Midlands Wildlife Area, the other one's on private lands. How? We don't know. We may never know. I want that to be something that's understood. We may never know. We talked about possible transmission earlier. That's a possibility of those things. So we'll just leave it there. But I really want to punch out there, since the 2003 to now, the surveillance work we found it, which is half the battle. Now we just have to figure out what to do from there. Our focus at this point will be response monitoring, management moving forward. Both were found in 14, but the one in our Midlands was so close to 16. We created a buffer zone about 1.5 miles. Is why we got 16 involved as well. So because deer can travel, we wanted to make sure we cover all bases. All right. So of course, like we said, we've established CWD management zones, or CMZs. Both hunters have been notified that they are aware. We've started a response plan activated, which you can see on delaware.gov/CWD. The next step, we're talking with USDA APHIS, and this is for cluster sampling, so we can see the prevalence and where, if there's any further spread. They're talking about doing 100 or 550 to 100 deer to cluster sample in socialized groups. So we're not really trying to randomize things per se, but we're going to make sure to say, hey, we know this deer in this location. We're going to just look at those social groups in that area. We're going to look for spread, like I said, prevalence. And if we find more, if we find something closer to 15, like we just, then it may spread a little bit. This CMZ might get bigger. Looking at mandatory sampling during the November general firearm season, we're still in the works of how that's going to work out. And of course, like it's always been, voluntary sampling. You guys, we really can look at you to help like you've always done. Looking at hunter harvest, our DDAC harvest, which Brian Harris runs, so we be talking with farmers about that. We're looking at doing head collection sites, so there'll be like little freezers, like at the walk-in areas within CMZ 14 and 16. So we got Trap Pond, we got the walk-in here, and then the Gumboro Community Center. So there'll be a site there, drop off guys, and we're looking at other sites to drop off as well. All right, so then of course there's regulations, which I'm sure everyone wants to talk about. There's some proposed amendments: no baiting or feeding deer within the CMZ. Okay. No transport of full carcasses outside of the CMZ unless authorized processor, taxidermist, or in a receptacle at your home to be disposed of at the landfill. So you can bag this, like the carcass of the deer, what's left that you butchered, and you can put it in a bag in your trash can at your home, and then it'll be taken to the dump. Okay. And this all will be kind of determined after more cluster sampling to see how far this is extending. If it comes back positive, are we going to tell you, and will we come to pick up the meat? Yes, we will call and let you know that your meat is tested positive, and we'll let you choose what you want to do with that. Okay. Will we pick it up? We haven't discussed that yet, but I want to make promises on that one, but
I wouldn't say we picked it up.
okay, there.
Yeah, so
You can dispose of it in your own landfill, just like you would the rest of stuff.
so that happens, you have all the CWD, I know some of things eventually research. But Delaware, not the season, they'll issue the hunter of the testing to replace that tag.
We haven't gotten to that point of discussion yet.
Any other questions?
Haven't gotten to that point. Any other questions?
No baiting, so that would be, so 14 to 16.
Correct. Then those CMC zones, yeah.
So the question was if there would be,
Thank you, God. With baiting restrictions within zones 14 and 16. That is correct. Keep forgetting that. Thank you. But I need to speak up here.
We about that, we be Warrington County.
Will we be able to bait King County? That is outside the CMC zone? Yes.
Any other questions? Warning.
You're okay. Good. Any other further questions in here? Okay.
Well, they can get that back, you know, if you're making that measure.
How long, so you just asked, how long is the test for, before you get it back? So I want to preface it. So we started this test on November 14th, right? And we were kind of last in line there for a while. So this is why it seems like it took so long. We didn't have CWD, so most our labs were like, they kind of reserved that for last for those that have not had detections. They saved others for the beginning of the line for the most part with those that had it already. And we have our neighboring states that have so many samples. So that's why it kind of took a while. But typically we can probably get a turnaround between 1 and 2 weeks, give or take, depending on the method of testing. But we'll definitely give you calls, you know.
Most after process.
Possibly, and just, hold on to your meat till you want it. Yeah.
If it's a deer processor deer, are you all planning on notifying the deer processor as well, or just the hunter?
So your question to this is, if it's a processor deer,
Yeah.
when we notify the processor, yes, we have been notifying them as well. Correct. Any other questions?
If deer for a processor has been tested and comes back positive, what does that do to the rest of the deer that's been processed through that system?
So the question is, what happens to the other deer in the processor? That's we'll tell the hunter, we'll tell the processor. And then I want to say, this is going to be kind of a tough question really to answer. It's kind of up to the processor or any other hunters, how that's distributed. We can't call every hunter and say, oh, take this by the way, it's two. Each processor is trying to do the best they can to clean their areas the best they can with the others. Like I said, there's nothing to say that this transmission from meat to meat to meat. We're talking open cut CNS food getting it where we're open, and most processors, especially when it comes to our Sussex County Correctional Institution where we take for our donations, is the boned meat, which we'll talk about later about some recommendations for that. So we'll go ahead and move on to our recommendations. All right, so for the general public, our non-hunters that, love their viewing or beautiful wildlife, we ask that you don't make contact with deer. That's just kind of typical. Let wildlife be wildlife. We ask that you don't feed or water deer. If you see a sick animal, maybe if you suspect possibly CW or whatever sickness, anything, you could report it to our online sick wildlife reporting method, which is de.gov/report sick wildlife. That's the best way for that to come to us. I see it in an email. My partner sees it. We'll give you a call, get further details. We ask that you see a deer, fawn, whatever, don't capture, let it go. Give us a call, and we'll go from the next thing. We're asking you not to transport these deer for rehabilitation. For you, the hunter, or mostly hunters, I assume. If you see a sick deer during hunting, same website. Report it. Let us know where it's at. Then we can see about getting land permissions, see if we can test, all that stuff. When you're handling the deer, if you think it's acting abnormally and appears to be sick, don't handle it, don't consume it. That's also a recommendation from CDC, especially if it tests positive. Recommendation from CDC is not to consume the deer. When you're field dressing, make sure you're wearing your rubber gloves. If you're doing if you're going through cutting up your deer, don't cut through the bone with the saw. Bone out the meat. Minimize the contact as best you can. There's like high risk parts. We don't consume the brain, spinal cord tissues, eyes. I have a picture in the next slide. Spleen under lymph nodes. Always wash your hands afterwards. Make sure you do it thoroughly. Make sure you're using separate utensils. So if you're butchering your deer with one, don't use it to cook. Separate them out. You can clean your butchering utensils. You can use a 40% bleach solution. So if you're going 1-to-1, you can gallons like 40% bleach. And you want that utensil to soak for about 5-10 minutes, give or take. But this doesn't exactly work for solid tissue. So if you guys can solid meat, throw that away in disposal and clean out your utensil appropriately. And this is we're asking throughout the state, not within just CMC. So this is kind of for more hunting process. We were just talking about a lot of this. Bone out the meat. This goes to carcass properly. This is where I'm asking you to bag it, put it in your trash to be taken to the dump. Do not bury in your backyard. If you're going to a processor, ask the processor if they do it individually. I can't. We have no regulatory authority or processor, so we can't tell them what to do. But if just go to the processor, hey, do you bone out? Do you do it individually? They say yes or no. You make your decision. Make sure that they're processing the meat, the bone out, and then see if they're disposing the carcass properly as well. Don't need the high risk parts that we just discussed: the brain, the eyes, the spleen, the spinal column, lymph nodes. That's the same idea. If you're going to get that big buck, you really want to get it mounted on the wall. Put the head in the bag if you can. Take it to the taxidermist, deliver it there in the bag. Make sure they're properly disposing of what's left, because they skin it all. So the head, make sure they're taken to the dump properly. Deer donations. So you harvest your deer, you got a freezer full of meat, you want to donate, that's totally fine. All the same previous precautions. Donating to Delaware Hunters Against the Hungry for specifically CMC 1416. We're asking that you go to Trash 14, go to Trap Pond walk-in area to donate there. If you're in 16, go to Gumboro Community Center walk-in cooler. We're working on making a tag. This isn't the finalized tag, but there will be a tag there for you to put your information, your deer registration, where you've shot it at. And that way we can track these things. This meat's gonna get donated. It's going to go to Sussex County Correctional or some process that's doing this for us. And we want to be able to track. So if it does come back positive, we can identify what deer, take that meat out, take it to the dump as proper, and then anything else that's good, we can take it to public. Okay. All deer will be tested before consumption. All right. We do ask if no head, can't ask to donate. That's now you're getting into that, you're cutting through the spinal fluid, we're risking some spread there. So if there's no head, we can't ask you to donate. So please, heads, full body, carcass. How can you help? Hunting is very critical to the management of CWD. So yes, there's always that question of the aphis, but you guys are the biggest, proponent when it comes to population control, disease spread. We ask that you continue to help us with surveillance. Density is a big proponent here when it comes to, this spread. So you guys come in, you harvest deer, it reduces the density of your deer herds. Follow new regulations to reduce the spread, avoiding baiting within, and we ask even outside, but within the CMZ zone, there might be that regulation. Dispose of harvested deer properly. Again, take it to your landfill or at your trash can at your house. Report sick or dead deer to that website. It's a great website. Submit sample for testing, even if it's your buck, because bucks are 2 times as likely to contract CWD. So please, it's help us help you as best we can. Here's our resources. Please take a picture of this. If you have questions or you want to know more about this, these are some great resources that are out there. Paddles are a place that we go for testing. USDA is a big help for us. Deer University in Mississippi State has a great website with a lot of videos up there to be able to answer some questions more about this disease. NDA, they're a great resource as well. You can, again, thank you to USDA APHIS. And at this point, we're at the end.